Marcus took a seat next to Sarah, feeling nervous about what his father was going to say. James Thompson sat behind his large desk, looking more serious than Marcus had ever seen him. "Sarah has told me everything that happened on Flight 447, James began. "Not just about your initial behavior, but also about how you apologized and how you treated the crew after our phone conversation." Marcus glanced at Sarah, who gave him a small nod of encouragement. "However," James continued, "this incident has made me realize that I've failed as a father and as a CEO. I've allowed you to benefit from this company's success without teaching you about responsibility or respect for others." "Dad, I want to learn," Marcus said quickly. "I want to do better." James held up his hand. "I'm glad to hear that because Sarah and I have come up with a plan. If you're serious about being part of this company, you're going to start from the bottom and work your way up, just like every other employee." Marcus felt a knot form in his stomach. "What do you mean?" Sarah spoke up. "Your father has offered to let me design a training program for you. You'll spend 6 months working in different departments of the airline. You'll start as a baggage handler, then work in customer service, then as a flight attendant, and finally in management." "You want me to be a baggage handler?" Marcus asked, shocked. "For the first month, yes," James said firmly. "You'll learn what it's like to work a physically demanding job for regular wages. You'll also learn how much effort goes into getting luggage from the check-in counter to the correct airplane." Marcus had never had a real job before. The idea of doing physical labor and earning a regular paycheck instead of just getting money from his father was terrifying. "What if I say no?" Marcus asked. "Then you'll no longer be welcome on any Thompson Airlines flights," James said coldly. "And you'll no longer receive any financial support from me. You can find your own way in life." Marcus realized his father was completely serious. This wasn't just about learning the business. This was about learning how to be a decent human being. "Okay," Marcus said slowly. "I'll do it." Sarah smiled. "Good, you'll start next Monday at 5 a.m. Wear clothes you don't mind getting dirty." Over the next week, Marcus had to completely change his lifestyle. He bought work boots and simple clothes. He set his alarm for 4:30 a.m., something he had never done in his life. He also moved out of his expensive apartment and into a small studio apartment that he could afford on a baggage handler's salary on his first day. Marcus met his supervisor, Carlos Rivera, who had been working for Thompson Airlines for 20 years. Carlos didn't know that Marcus was the CEO's son. As far as he knew, Marcus was just another new employee. "Listen up, rookie," Carlos said. "This job is harder than it looks. Those bags can weigh up to 50 pounds each, and we handle hundreds of them every day. You'll be sore for the first few weeks, but your body will get used to it." Marcus spent that first day loading and unloading luggage from airplanes. By lunchtime, his back was aching and his hands were covered in blisters. He had never realized how physically demanding this work was. During his lunch break, Marcus sat with some of the other baggage handlers. They talked about their families, their financial struggles, and their hopes for the future. Marcus realized that these weren't just employees to him anymore. They were real people with real problems and dreams. One of the baggage handlers, Maria Gonzalez, mentioned that her daughter was starting college next year, but they were struggling to afford the tuition. Another worker, Tom Bradley, talked about how he was saving money to buy his wife a new wedding ring because her original ring had been lost in a house fire. Marcus listened to these stories and felt ashamed of how he had lived his life. He had spent more money on a single dinner than these hard-working people earned in a week. After a month of working as a baggage handler, Marcus was transferred to customer service. This job was even more challenging in a different way. He had to deal with angry passengers, flight delays, lost luggage, and booking problems. He learned that many customers saw airline employees as the enemy, even when problems weren't their fault. During his second week in customer service, Marcus encountered Mrs. Patterson, an elderly woman whose flight had been canceled due to bad weather. She was trying to get to her grandson's wedding and was very upset. "This is ridiculous," Mrs. Patterson shouted. "I paid good money for this ticket, and now you're telling me I can't get there until tomorrow? The wedding will be over," The old Marcus would have been annoyed by her yelling. But now, after working with regular people for over a month, Marcus understood her frustration. He also remembered Mrs. Chun from Flight 447 and how frightened she must have been about missing her surgery. "Ma'am, I completely understand why you're upset," Marcus said calmly. "Let me see what I can do to help you get to that wedding." Marcus spent the next hour on the phone with other airlines, trying to find Mrs. Patterson a seat on a flight that would get her to the wedding on time. Finally, he found a spot on a competitor's airline that would work. "But that flight costs more money," Mrs. Patterson said when Marcus explained the option. "Don't worry about that," Marcus said. "Thomson Airlines will cover the difference as an apology for the inconvenience." Marcus wasn't sure if he was allowed to make that promise, but he used his own money to pay the extra cost. He figured it was the least he could do. When Mrs. Patterson left, she shook Marcus's hand and thanked him repeatedly. "You're a good young man," she said. "Your company is lucky to have you." That comment made Marcus feel better than any compliment he had ever received about his expensive clothes or fancy car after 2 months in customer service. Marcus was promoted to flight attendant training. This was the most difficult part of his education. He had to learn about safety procedures, emergency protocols, and how to handle difficult situations at 30,000 feet. Sarah Martinez was one of his instructors. She was tough but fair. And she didn't give Marcus any special treatment just because she knew who his father was. "Being a flight attendant isn't just about serving drinks," Sarah explained to the training class. "You're responsible for the safety and comfort of every person on that airplane. In an emergency, passengers will look to you for leadership and guidance." During his training flights, Marcus worked alongside experienced flight attendants who taught him how to deal with different types of passengers. He learned how to calm down nervous flyers, how to handle medical emergencies, and how to maintain his professionalism even when passengers were rude or demanding. On one flight, Marcus encountered a businessman who reminded him of his old self. The man was arrogant and demanding, treating the flight crew like servants. "This coffee is cold," the businessman complained loudly. "Don't you people know how to do anything right?" Marcus wanted to tell the man to show some respect, but he remembered his training. Instead, he smiled and said, "I'm sorry about that, sir. Let me get you a fresh cup right away." As Marcus brought the new coffee, the businessman continued complaining. "I fly first class all the time, and the service is usually much better than this. I might have to switch to a different airline." "I understand your frustration, sir," Marcus said politely. "Is there anything else I can do to improve your flight experience?" The businessman looked surprised by Marcus's professional response. He had probably expected an argument. "Well, I suppose the service is okay now," he said grudgingly. Later, Sarah pulled Marcus aside. "I saw how you handled that difficult passenger. You did exactly the right thing. It would have been easy to get defensive, but you stayed focused on solving the problem." After 4 months of working in different departments, Marcus was finally ready for management training. But this version of management training was very different from what he had expected. Instead of sitting in an office making decisions, Marcus had to spend time with employees at every level of the company. He met with pilots to discuss flight safety. He worked with mechanics to understand airplane maintenance. And he sat in on meetings where customer complaints were reviewed and addressed. During one of these meetings, Marcus learned about a serious problem. Several employees had filed complaints about a supervisor named Richard Banks who was treating workers unfairly and creating a hostile work environment. "Banks has been with the company for 10 years, the HR manager explained. "But lately, he's been very difficult to work with. He yells at employees, he plays favorites, and he's been making inappropriate comments to female staff members." Marcus thought about his own behavior on Flight 447. He realized that he had been just like Richard Banks, treating employees as if they didn't matter and expecting special treatment because of who he was. "What's going to happen to Banks?" Marcus asked. "We're still investigating," the HR manager said. "But if the complaints are confirmed, he'll probably be fired." 2 weeks later, Richard Banks and 3 other supervisors who had been treating employees poorly were indeed fired. Marcus watched as they cleaned out their desks and left the building, and he realized that could have been him if he hadn't learned his lesson on Flight 447. As his 6-month training program came to an end, Marcus felt like a completely different person. He had lost weight from the physical work, he had learned to live on a modest budget, and most importantly, he had developed respect for the hardworking people who made though. Marcus Thompson sat in his usual first-class seat, scrolling through his phone as the airport bustled around him. At 28, he was used to getting the best of everything. His father owned Thompson Airlines, one of the biggest airline companies in the country. Marcus had grown up flying in private jets and first-class cabins. He never questioned why he deserved these privileges. The gate area was crowded with tired travelers, waiting for Flight 447 to Chicago. Marcus barely looked up from his phone when the boarding announcement began. He knew the drill. First-class passengers boarded first, and his seat 1A was always reserved for him on any Thompson Airlines flight. As Marcus walked down the jet bridge, he noticed something unusual. The flight attendants seemed nervous. Sarah Martinez, the head flight attendant, kept checking her tablet and whispering to her colleagues. Marcus had seen Sarah many times before. She had been working for his father's company for over 15 years. "Good evening, Mr. Thompson," Sarah said with a forced smile. "Welcome aboard." Marcus nodded without really looking at her. He tossed his leather bag into the overhead bin and settled into his spacious seat. The leather was soft, and he had plenty of legroom. This was how flying should be, he thought to himself. About 10 minutes later, Sarah appeared beside his seat again. This time she looked even more uncomfortable. Her hands were shaking slightly as she held her tablet. "Mr. Thompson, I'm sorry to bother you," she began quietly, "but we have a situation. There's been a mistake with the seating arrangements." Marcus looked up from his phone, annoyed. "What kind of mistake?" Sarah glanced around nervously. Other passengers were still boarding, and she obviously didn't want to cause a scene. "Well, sir, it appears that seat 1A was also assigned to another passenger. A very important passenger." Marcus laughed. "Important? Do you know who I am?" "My father owns this airline. I think I'm pretty important." "Yes, sir, I know," Sarah said, her voice getting quieter. "But this other passenger—" "Well, the booking came directly from corporate headquarters with specific instructions." "What instructions?" Marcus was getting irritated now. Sarah looked around again, making sure no other passengers were listening. "The passenger is traveling with a medical team. It's some kind of emergency transport situation. They specifically requested seat 1I because it has the most space for medical equipment." Marcus stared at her. "Medical equipment? This is first class, not an ambulance. Tell them to move to coach." "Sir, I can't do that. The orders came from the highest level of management. I was told that no exceptions could be made. The highest level? My father is the highest level. Call him right now." Sarah's face went pale. "Mr. Thompson, I already tried calling corporate." They confirmed the instructions. "I'm really sorry, but we need you to move to seat 3A. It's still first class, and it's actually a window seat with great views." Marcus felt his face getting hot with anger. Other passengers were starting to stare. He had never been asked to move from his seat before. This was humiliating. "This is ridiculous," he said loudly. "I'm not moving anywhere. This is my seat on my father's airline." Just then, a small group of people came down the aisle. There was an elderly woman in a wheelchair being pushed by a man in a medical uniform. Behind them walked a woman in an expensive suit who looked like she might be a lawyer or business executive. The woman in the suit approached Sarah. "Excuse me, is there a problem with our seating arrangement?" Sarah looked back and forth between Marcus and the woman. "No, ma'am. Just a small delay. We'll have everything sorted out in just a moment." The woman looked directly at Marcus. "Young man, I understand there might be some confusion. My mother needs this specific seat because of her medical condition. She's traveling to Chicago for emergency surgery. And her oxygen equipment requires the extra space that seat 1A provides. Marcus looked at the elderly woman in the wheelchair. She was very thin and had an oxygen mask over her face. She looked weak and tired. For a moment, Marcus felt a tiny bit of sympathy, but then his pride took over. "Look, lady, I don't care about your mother's medical problems. This is my seat, and I'm not moving. If she needs special accommodations, she should have booked a medical transport flight." The woman's expression changed from polite to shocked. Several other passengers nearby gasped. Even Sarah looked horrified. "Excuse me?" the woman said. "Did you just say you don't care about a sick elderly woman's medical needs?" Marcus realized he might have sounded too harsh, but he was too proud to back down now. "What I'm saying is that I have a reservation for this seat and I'm not giving it up. First-class passengers pay extra for specific seats." "Actually," the woman said calmly, "my mother didn't pay for this seat. It was provided free of charge by Thomson Airlines as part of their community service program for patients who need emergency medical transport." Marcus was confused. He had never heard of any community service program. "What community service program?" Sarah spoke up quietly. "Sir, your father started the program last year. Thomson Airlines provides free flights for patients who need emergency medical care but can't afford it. It's been in all the company newsletters." Marcus never read the company newsletters. He was too busy enjoying the benefits of being the CEO's son to pay attention to the actual business operations. The woman in the suit pulled out her phone. "Perhaps I should call someone at Thomson Airlines to clarify this situation. Who are you calling?" Marcus asked. "I'm calling James Thompson directly. He personally approved my mother's travel arrangements." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. This woman was going to call his father. If his father found out that Marcus was refusing to give up his seat for a sick elderly woman who was part of the company's charity program, he would be furious. "Wait," Marcus said quickly. "Maybe we can work something out." But it was too late. The woman was already dialing. Marcus could hear the phone ringing through the speaker. "Hello, Mr. Thompson. This is Rebecca Shun. Yes, we met last month at the charity gala. I'm calling about my mother's flight arrangements. There seems to be a young man in seat 1A who is refusing to move for my mother's medical equipment." Marcus couldn't hear his father's response, but he could see Rebecca's face change as she listened. "Oh, really?" Rebecca said, looking directly at Marcus. "The young man claims to be your son. Marcus, I believe he said his name was?" There was a long pause. Marcus felt like everyone in first class was staring at him. His face was burning with embarrassment. Rebecca listened for another moment, then handed the phone to Marcus. "Your father would like to speak with you." With shaking hands, Marcus took the phone. He could already hear his father's angry voice before he even put it to his ear. "Marcus, what the hell do you think you're doing?" Marcus held the phone with trembling hands as his father's voice boomed through the speaker. Even though James Thompson was hundreds of miles away in his corporate office, his anger was crystal clear. "Dad, I can explain," Marcus started, but his father cut him off immediately. "Explain? Explain what?" "That my own son is refusing to help a sick elderly woman who needs emergency medical transport. Do you have any idea how this makes our company look?" Everyone in first class could hear James Thompson's voice. The other passengers were pretending not to listen, but Marcus could see them all stealing glances in his direction. He felt smaller with each word his father spoke. "Marcus, I want you to listen to me very carefully," James continued. "Mrs. Chun's mother is a 92-year-old woman who survived the Holocaust. She volunteered at children's hospitals for 60 years. When she needed emergency heart surgery but couldn't afford the flight, our company was honored to help her. And now you're telling me that my own son is blocking her from getting the medical care she needs?" Marcus felt sick to his stomach. He hadn't known any of this background information. He had just seen an old woman and assumed she wasn't important enough to inconvenience him. "I didn't know," Marcus whispered into the phone. "You didn't know because you never bothered to learn about what this company actually does," his father said coldly. "You just show up, take the benefits, and act like you own the place." Well, let me tell you something, son. You don't own anything. Everything you have is because of the hard work of people like Sarah Martinez and the thousands of other employees who actually care about serving our customers. Rebecca Chun was watching this conversation with a mixture of sympathy and disappointment. Her mother, still sitting in the wheelchair, looked confused and tired. She probably didn't understand what all the arguing was about. "Dad, what do you want me to do?" Marcus asked quietly. "First, you're going to apologize to Mrs. Chun and her daughter. Then you're going to move to whatever seat Sarah assigns you." "And Marcus?" "After this flight lands, you and I are going to have a very serious conversation about your future with this company." The phone call ended. Marcus sat there for a moment, holding the silent phone while everyone stared at him. He had never felt so embarrassed in his entire life. He stood up slowly and walked over to where Rebecca Chun was standing with her mother. The elderly woman looked up at him with kind, tired eyes that reminded him of his own grandmother. "Mrs. Chun, Miss Chun," Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm very sorry. I was completely wrong, and I apologize for my behavior. Please, take seat 1. I hope your mother's surgery goes well." Rebecca Chun studied his face for a moment. "Thank you," she said simply. "I hope you learned something from this." Marcus nodded and moved out of the way while the medical team carefully helped Mrs. Chun into seat 1A. They began setting up her oxygen equipment and making sure she was comfortable for the flight. Sarah approached Marcus with a new boarding pass. "Mr. Thompson, I've assigned you to seat 4C. It's still in first class." As Marcus gathered his belongings, he noticed that seat 4C was actually in the middle of a row between two other passengers. It wasn't a window or aisle seat like he was used to, but he didn't complain. He had already embarrassed himself enough for one day. The flight took off without any further incidents. Marcus tried to read a magazine, but he couldn't concentrate. He kept thinking about his father's angry words and the disappointed look on Rebecca Chun's face. He also couldn't stop thinking about Mrs. Chun, the elderly woman who had lived through so much and was now facing another medical crisis. About halfway through the flight, Marcus got up to use the bathroom. As he walked past seat 1A, he saw that Mrs. Chun was sleeping peacefully. Her daughter was reading a book while keeping a careful eye on the medical equipment. When Marcus returned to his seat, he found a note waiting for him. It was from Sarah Martinez. "Mr. Thompson," the note said, "I've been working for your father's company for 15 years. In all that time, I've never seen him as disappointed as he sounded today. But I've also never seen him as hopeful as he was when you apologized to Mrs. Chun. Your father is a good man, who built this company on the principle of treating people with dignity and respect. I hope you'll remember that." Marcus folded the note and put it in his pocket. For the rest of the flight, he thought about Sarah's words. He realized that he had spent his whole life taking advantage of his father's success without ever understanding what made that success possible. When the plane landed in Chicago, Marcus watched as the medical team carefully helped Mrs. Chun off the plane and into a wheelchair. Rebecca Chun thanked the flight crew and shook hands with Sarah Martinez. As Marcus gathered his things to leave the plane, Sarah stopped him. "Mr. Thompson, I want you to know that the crew handled this situation very professionally, but I have to file a report about what happened." "It's company policy." Marcus nodded. "I understand. You were just doing your job. Actually, you were doing it very well." Sarah looked surprised. Marcus had never complimented any of the flight crew before. "Also," Marcus continued, "I want you to know that I'm going to talk to my father about giving you and your crew some kind of recognition for how you handled this situation. You could have just forced me to move, but instead you tried to resolve it peacefully." Sarah smiled for the first time since the incident began. "Thank you, Mr. Thompson. That means a lot." As Marcus walked through the airport, he pulled out his phone to call his father. But before he could dial, his phone rang. It was James Thompson calling him. "Marcus, I just got off the phone with Rebecca Chun," his father said. "She told me about your apology and how you handled yourself after our conversation. I'm proud of you for doing the right thing, even though it took you a while to get there." Marcus felt a small sense of relief, but he knew this conversation was far from over. Dad, I want to apologize to you too. I've been taking this company and my privileges for granted. I didn't even know about the community service program. That's exactly what we need to talk about, James said. When you get back to town tomorrow, come to my office. We're going to discuss your role in this company going forward. What do you mean? Marcus asked nervously. I mean, it's time for you to start learning what this business is really about. You can't just coast on being the CEO's son forever. If you want to be part of Thompson Airlines, you're going to have to earn it. Marcus spent that night in his Chicago hotel room thinking about his conversation with his father. He also thought about Mrs. Chun and her daughter, and he wondered how the surgery had gone. For the first time in his life, he felt genuinely concerned about someone he barely knew. The next morning, Marcus flew back home on a Thompson Airlines flight. This time, he paid attention to everything the flight crew did. He watched how they helped elderly passengers, how they dealt with crying babies, and how they maintained their professional attitudes even when passengers were rude or demanding. He also noticed things about the plane itself that he had never paid attention to before. The seats were comfortable, but they weren't the newest models. The carpet was clean but showed signs of wear. He realized that his father's company was successful, but it wasn't infinitely wealthy. Every decision about spending money had to be made carefully. When Marcus arrived at his father's office the next day, he was surprised to find Sarah Martinez there as well. She was sitting across from his father's desk, and they both looked serious. Marcus, sit down, his father said. Sarah and I have been discussing what happened on Flight 447.